I'm Greg, and my parents are here tonight too. But I want to start with a question. Do you remember your first Space Invaders? Whew. I don't mean literally, but something that truly captured your imagination as a child. For me, it was 1978, and I was 8 years old. And well, you probably guessed it by now, it was Space Invaders. I saw this cool box with amazing lights and sounds coming out. Man, I had to try. And pretty soon I was hooked. Well, it wasn't long before I got a Woody for Christmas. And you're probably thinking, it was the Atari 2600. Now we could play Space Invaders at home. And this was concurrent with the golden age of video games. My friend Tom and I would ride our bikes to the local arcades to check out the latest and greatest games. But arcades seemingly came and went in the early 80s. Now, Tom's dad also had about a dozen pinball machines in his basement. I was amazed that anyone could have this many machines in their house. And although those early 1960s electromechanical games didn't yet stack up to those video games that I had, pretty soon I found an affinity for pinball. You see, pinball's been around for about 250 years, even though flippers weren't invented until the 1940s. Amazingly, pinballs were smashed and thrown into the rivers in New York City for ties to gambling and the mob, and were really illegal until just recently in many jurisdictions. Now, that video game revolution that I talked about in the late 70s and 80s forced pinball to innovate. The introduction of solid-state technology, ramps, multi-balls, voices, and other things that really primed the growth for the late 80s and early 90s. Now, one day I saw this pinball wizard. Now, I got Rocket Man going through my head for some reason, but he showed me some tricks, how to catch the ball on a flipper, pass it from one flipper to another, and most importantly, how to nudge the machine, not tilt it. You see, the tilt mechanism in a pinball machine is much like that game of Operation you played as a kid. There's a conical-shaped pendulum inside a metal ring. If you push the machine too hard, you get metal-on-metal contact and a warning, and even worse, maybe a tilt. Well, as the games became increasingly complex in the 90s, yeah, we were worried about Judgment Day back in the 90s too. We had dot matrix displays, we had video modes, multiple plungers. Each game seemed to press the next one, and my love of pinball continued to grow. But alas, I had to go out and get a job. I was traveling the world, and I didn't have a lot of time for pinball, and amazingly, pinball almost died. It dwindled to a single manufacturer, and many predicted its imminent demise by the end of the century. By the time I got back to the US, games could be snapped up for a fraction of their cost. Here's my son Patrick over there. We refurbished some old games. We picked them up, a favorite from college, Funhouse. And so my love of collecting began. Then 3 years ago, my wife Sybil was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and passed away at the age of 44. It really turned my life upside down and that of my whole family. I had to reassess my own priorities and realizing that life was short, I wanted to spend more time not working and doing things that I enjoyed. So one of those was getting out and playing pinball. I joined a local league. Yeah, don't laugh, those things do exist. And so I got together weekly with fellow pinheads over a few beers and playing new games, and it was really a joy for me to get out and do something in the community. But then a year ago, the owner Steve announced he was going to be closing the doors. And so it was time yet to reassess. And although this loss wasn't as profound as my previous one, it was one I knew I could tackle. Steve and I decided to move some machines to a nearby town so we could keep our leagues going, but it didn't feel quite right. So a fellow league player and I decided to buy a building and bring our league back to our town. Yeah, Jill, we want to give back to our community too. So, what I can say is pinball's booming. I'd love to play with you guys later tonight. New and old machines that are through the roof. There's multiple manufacturers now pumping out new machines every year. They're introducing LCD screens, color-changing LEDs, Bluetooth. There's even machines that take selfies now. And amazingly, limited edition and collector's edition models can sell for north of $10,000. Pinball is booming. So the message I'd like to give you is both the pinball industry and myself have had to hit our own personal reset buttons a few times over the years. You don't have to wait for a life-changing event. If you're stuck in a job you don't want, if you've been putting off that trip or whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. I give you permission. Pursue your passions.